Some home cooking does the Canadiens, Devils, and Oilers well. This is Stanley Cupdate, part of the NHL Wraparound podcast for Saturday, April 26, 2025. Vic and Neil with you, and Friday night's games maybe didn't quite reach the level of what we saw on Monday, but it was pretty close.
Yeah, the home ice for the lower seed really was something that erupted. I mean, certainly in Montreal and Edmonton, those crowds were off the charts, so it helped propel their team.
We're going to start in Montreal, and we're going to go chronological in this game, which we don't really do all the time, but I think that this is the best way to address this one. The Capitals come into this with a 2-0 lead. Patrick Laine out with an upper body injury. There had been some question as to whether or not he'd been dinged up in the second period of Game 2, so he sits this out. Aberjakai draws into the lineup. If you can close your eyes and spell his name, I'll give you an NHL Wraparound coffee cup. So during pregame warmups, does some chirping at center ice with Tom Wilson. A lot of this stuff goes back and forth. He's expected to add some toughness to the Canadiens lineup. And it was thought that Montreal's going to break quick from the gate, which they did. But Connor McMichael scored at the 3:20 mark. And it looked like the Capitals had the first period well in hand. But Alexander Carrier scores with 53 seconds left in the first. Cole Caulfield also scored a goal at the end of the second period with 9 seconds left after a Rasmus Sandin turnover. Great pass from Lane Hudson. And so Canadiens took a lead going into the third period, but probably the bigger note here for the Canadiens, Neil, was Sam Montembeault leaving with 8:21 left in the second. He was holding the back of his left leg and evidently strained something after pushing across the crease to make the save. So it would have appeared that even though the Capitals were down going into the third period, with Jakub Dobeš in goal, this provided a little bit of advantage for them.
You would have thought so, but it didn't. Dobeš played pretty well, and Montembeault wasn't really missed. But I was shocked when I saw him leave. Nobody knew why he left the game at first. He went to the dressing room at the TV timeout, and Dobeš came in. And the announcers, no one really understood why he was gone. They looked at the replay. They didn't see anything significant, but it was really weird. Right, for a playoff game for the guy to come out, and especially after the way he's played down the stretch and in the first two games.
It looked like Sportsnet's cameras actually did catch him down in the runway, grabbing at that left leg. So his status, of course, for Game 4 is going to be in question. But Dobeš was the centerpiece at the end of the second period, going to the locker room, skated through the Capitals, and that touched off little bit of a kerfuffle and ended up with the main combatants being Josh Anderson and Tom Wilson. And we had mentioned them earlier in this series, and they've got a little bit of history. They started going at it, and this thing actually ended up in the bench. The two of them were on top of each other, and this little battle went literally the length of the benches.
It did, but it was more of a wrestling bout, one guy being thrown over the other. If you notice, if you watch the replays of it, Wilson never took his gloves off.
Right.
You know, they had their gloves on the whole time. So it wasn't a fight. It was some kind of WWE stunt. I don't know. If you're going to fight, fight. If you're not going to fight, don't fight. Like, I mean, just, have it one way or the other. But this nonsense that they do nowadays with this punching each other with their glove on, doing all this stuff. And let me ask you something. If you punch a guy with your glove on in mid-ice, that's a penalty, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But if you punch him during a scrum, it's nothing.
Well, the end result was they got roughing minors and misconduct penalties, and the Canadiens took a 3-2 lead into the third period. Alex Ovechkin quickly ties it at the 2:39 mark, but then Christian Dvorak's shot, 1:38 later, was inadvertently deflected in by Brandon Duhaime. So the Canadiens go back ahead, and perhaps the turning point of this series came on the fifth goal scored by Montreal on Juraj Slafkovsky's goal. But on that play, Dylan Strome ran into Logan Thompson. It was kind of hard to see initially what the problem was because Strome's stick did get up high on Thompson, but when they helped him off the ice, it appeared to me that he was favoring his left leg.
Yeah, well, he couldn't put any weight on his left leg going off the ice, and then had to put his arm over the shoulder of somebody to go into the locker room. So now we got both starting goaltenders gone off and into the dressing room.
Alex Newhook winds up wrapping up the scoring with a power play goal. I love the Habs game, though. They are playing free. They're playing that they know they've got nothing to lose. The last team to get in the playoffs, and they're playing like they've got house money right now on the table.
They are, or they did last night. I'd be worried if I was the Capitals that they haven't made the proper adjustments, strategy changes since they came off of the OV chase. I mean, they just haven't. They haven't been the same team since the Ovechkin goal. They haven't gotten back to being that team they were earlier in the season, and they better get back there quick, because if they don't, they're no different than the Canadiens. They're just the same. They're just another team playing in the playoffs.
Shots on goal in this game were 40-21 for the Habs, 45-26 in hits. They're 2 for 5 on the power play. And to your point, this is a sloppy game for Washington. We don't want to belabor the Ovi thing too much longer if we don't have to, but the truth of the matter is it's there. The button-down Capitals that we had seen for the majority of the season, it's not there right now. And they're doing a lot of chasing in this series.
They are. They're just not the same team. They're not playing the same way. They do have some injuries. I get that. They are sloppy right now, and we'll see what they do and what happens with these two goaltenders. Will they be back for the next game, or will it be Lindgren versus Dobish again in Game 4?
Where do you see the advantage here if the backups have to play? Marty Biron believes that advantage Dobish. I beg to differ on that. I'd like to know your opinion, because Lindgren had prior experience a year ago with the Caps.
Lindgren's been around a bit longer. I don't see that it's an advantage of Dobish unless Marty Biron thinks that Dobish is that much better than Lindgren. They're both the backup. They're both not the starter. I don't see an advantage for either one, but I think, first of all, Washington's got a lot more to worry about than their goalkeeper. 6-3 was the final score. I never envisioned 9 goals going in that game.
I'm just wondering, from Biron being a French Canadian, if there's a little bit of a bias towards the Canadiens in this one.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, he never played for them, but he may feel that way.
Let's check in now on the Devils and the Hurricanes. And Jersey gets back into this series with a 3-2 double overtime win. Simon Nemec scores his first career playoff goal at 2:36 of the second overtime. Neil, he's only in because of the injuries to Luke Hughes and Brendan Dillon.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of injuries on the Devils, and that drew him into the lineup. But I got to say, it was quite a game between New Jersey and Carolina. Carolina seemed to be a little bit cocky in this game. They didn't have a shot on net almost the entire way through the first period. They were not the same team we'd seen at home.
I think, as we expected, the Devils came out quickly in this game. Nico Hischier scored a goal. Devils had an 8-4 shot edge in the first period. And I thought Carolina started to flip the script a little bit more in the second period. But early in the third, Dawson Mercer made it 2-0. But then Carolina gets a pair of power play goals in the third. Seth Jarvis, Sebastian Aho. But I really loved the way the Devils played this game in overtime. Threw caution to the wind. They really went after this thing. They had a shot advantage in the overtimes, and they drew 2 penalties as well. First one on Brett Burns, second one on Jordan Staal. So in the end, I believe that the Devils really earned this game because they certainly took the attack to Carolina, especially in the extra frames.
I think they definitely earned the win. I think they, if Carolina had won this game, it would have been a travesty for the effort that the Devils put in and the way they played. If Carolina had won it, all accolades would have gone to Freddie Anderson, who played excellent again in net for Carolina.
He did, and particularly in the first overtime when he made really good close-in saves on Stefan Nason and Nico Hischier. But the game-winning goal kind of leaked under his arm a little bit, and it was like, you know what? I don't think we're going to ping him on this, but it wasn't the greatest of goals to give up either. Something that can become decisive, and I think we're already starting to see it as this series goes on. Special teams. Carolina 3 of 10 on the power play. The Devils 0 for 10. And they've also given up a shorthanded goal to the Hurricanes. So you think, boy, the Devils could have gotten a power play goal or two in the right place. This could very well be a 2-1 series for them.
Yeah, but they didn't. And so that's part of what happens in the playoffs. I mean, Carolina has the better power play, and New Jersey's got Luke and Jack Hughes both out. So that really hurts their power play. And I think this series is going to be all Carolina's if they just get back to being motivated the way they were in the first two games. They just didn't look like the same team in game 3. And still it went to double overtime. So Carolina's got to get out there and work their tail off in game 4 and turn this thing back in their favor again and go home with a 3-1 lead.
That fourth game will be played Sunday at 3:30, and that game then will be followed by Canadiens Capitals game 4 at 6:30. The late game, Edmonton and LA, the Kings leading series 2-0 coming in. Let's start with the goaltenders. You had said you believed that Stuart Skinner should get the start, but Chris Knobloch begged to differ, and Calvin Pickard ends up in net.
He decided to go with the backup goalie Pickard, and he got the results he wanted. They won the game.
There's going to be a lot to this one. Fast start by the Oilers, pretty much similar to the way the Devils broke out of the gate. And they get goals from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Evan Bouchard, who gets the first of his 2 on the night in the first 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Adrian Kempe gets the Kings on the board late in the first. And then Kevin Fiala on the power play to tie the game with Evander Kane in the penalty box. And that's the second time in 2 games that Kane has taken a minor penalty and the Kings have scored on it. But Kane would get his revenge later in the game. Kings went ahead on Drew Doughty's power play goal. Their power play 7 of 12 in this series already. And this is a problem for the Oilers because it doesn't matter whether the puck is up on the points or down low. They are exploiting the Oilers' penalty killing pretty evidently.
Yeah, and if I told you there was going to be a power play in this series that was going to go 7 for 12, you'd say right away Edmonton. You wouldn't say LA with the players that are out there. But Kuzmenko makes a big, big difference to that power play, I'm telling you.
Connor Brown ties the game, and crowd in Edmonton is in a frenzy. And then Trevor Moore, just 9 seconds later, a one-handed flick with defenseman Jake Wallman draped on him, and that sapped the life out of the building again. So all of these highs and lows, ebbs and flows of this game, and the Kings wind up taking a 4-3 lead into the third period.
Yeah, that was an amazing goal. Amazing that it scored. I mean, literally just one hand on the stick, flipped it towards the goalie, through his legs into the net. And this is an NHL game. And a goalie doesn't stop a one-handed shot. I was sort of perplexed by that. But nevertheless, we're on to the third period.
So you're not feeling good about Pickard being in net at that point, is what you're saying?
No, I'm just thinking, like, how the hell did that goalie let that goal in? That was all I was thinking. It wasn't about Pickard or Stuart Skinner.
I thought the Kings actually defended fairly well for the first half of the final period. Darcy Kuemper did have to come up with a couple of saves. There was a goalpost in there, but the Kings had this game in their control once again. similar to game one. And then the turning point of this game, and let's see if it becomes the turning point of the series. Evander Kane scores a tying goal from in close. Skate to stick, pushes the puck over the goal line. The play is reviewed by Toronto to see if indeed it was a kick or if Kane got his stick on the puck, which he did. Jim Hiller then decides to challenge for goaltender interference. And I sat there shaking my head like, what are you doing?
Yeah, why did he do that? There was no goaltender interference on that one.
It wasn't close, and it was almost as if they were grasping at straws here. And I'm thinking, you know what? Worst case scenario, get this game to overtime, play it straight up. You've got a 2-0 lead in the series. Why risk going shorthanded against the Oilers?
I didn't understand it myself. I didn't understand why he did that, and it certainly backfired.
Just 10 seconds later, Bouchard scores his second goal of the game, and that gets followed up by empty net goals by Connor McDavid and Connor Brown. The one thing that I could think about after this was 31 years ago, there was a challenge in the Stanley Cup final for Marty McSorley's illegal stick, and that flipped the final for the Kings against the Montreal Canadiens. Kings had won the first game of that series, and they were prepared to go home with a 2-0 series lead. And Eric Desjardins wound up scoring the tying goal on the power play and the winning goal in overtime, and the Canadiens rolled from there. And I was just starting to wonder, boy, is this going to turn this series around?
Well, when you mention that, I'm thinking 1993, what did you challenge in 1993? And you're right, you could look out on the ice and see that a guy's stick had way too much curve in it and then say something to the referee, and then you challenge it, and then they would measure it to see if it had too much curve. That happened to McSorley several times during the playoffs, and certainly the one in the Montreal Forum really turned that series around. Sometimes when you grasp at straws like this, it can turn things around. Game 4 is so huge, and I want to just say something that we said yesterday, that all three of these series will now go to Game 4. And I was mentioning that Game 4 is the most important game of the series. Now look at these series. If you think about Montreal-Washington, if Montreal wins, the series starts over again. If Washington wins, they've got a stranglehold. New Jersey-Carolina. If New Jersey wins, they've got a brand new series, 2 out of 3, with 2 in Carolina. If Carolina wins, stranglehold. 2 more games at home just to win 1. And if Edmonton, LA, same scenario. LA wins, they're heading back to LA with a stranglehold on the Oilers. But if the Oilers win, they're heading to LA with a brand new series, and all are forgiven. So this Game 4 coming up is huge in these 3 series.
Game 4, Kings and Oilers, 9:30 Sunday evening. Let's look ahead now to Saturday's games, all on TBS at 1, 4, 7, and 9:30. The day will kick off with Tampa Bay and Florida, the Panthers leading 2-0. And already the Lightning have received the news that Brandon Hagel will not be available for this game. He has been suspended, 1 game only, for his interference penalty on Alex Barkov, who will be more than likely a game-time decision for this one.
Yeah, and this was an egregious hit. I mean, this wasn't necessary. This is something that he should be suspended for. And unfortunately for John Cooper and the Tampa Bay Lightning, they have to go in without their very best second line player missing this game. So it's going to be a tough row to hoe in Florida after losing the first 2 in Tampa Bay.
Remember we talked yesterday about the Columbus series with Tampa in 2019, the 4-game sweep, and Nikita Kucherov took a penalty that got himself suspended for Game 3 of that particular series. History may be repeating itself here.
It may be, but Tampa's got to change their game dramatically to be able to catch up in this series. I think this is going to be Florida all the way now. I just don't see Tampa, they've done some things in this series that are going to eliminate themselves. I don't see them getting back in this.
What is the most basic thing that Cooper can do for his team in terms of a strategy in this one?
I think just stay composed. Do not react. Don't be immature. Don't try to take foolish penalties. Don't get upset. Don't throw the puck away because you don't know where to send it. Just stay composed, and you can outskill Florida. Tampa can outskill Florida. They can't outmuscle them, though. So don't try.
How about play safe but don't play scared?
Yeah, that might be the words.
Second game of the day will be Vegas at Minnesota, with the Wild holding a 2-1 lead in this series. As we have spoken, Minnesota looks like a completely different club now. And at this point of the series, it's Vegas' turn to make the adjustments. And some of their big guns really have to get going, starting with Jack Eichel and Mark Stone.
Yeah, Jack Eichel has not got a point. He's got to get going. Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy have been too much for Vegas. And we'll see if that continues. But it's sort of a fun series if you think about it, with Minnesota almost not making the playoffs, just hanging on, waiting to get healthy again. Now they get healthy, and now they're playing very well.
Philip Gustafsson has been exceptional in this series so far. We saw Aiden Hill get pulled in favor of Kira Schmid in Game 3. And I'm expecting Minnesota to really come out with the same juice. And the key here is going to be how well Vegas withstands that opening onslaught from the Wild.
Absolutely. And the home ice thing and the fans and all that. And knowing that Game 5 is back in Vegas and they're got to go back for Game 5, I think you're right. I think it's just going to be, can Vegas hold on tight at the beginning of the game to see if they can hang on to get their chances. But certainly Minnesota's going to come hard in the beginning of the game.
Game 3, Toronto at Ottawa, and the Leafs will be looking to be the first team to punch their ticket into the final 8. Maple Leafs aren't scared of anybody. And right now, I believe that this is a game that the Leafs are going to be looking to make a statement that not only can we close the series, but we can step on the throat and get this done in a sweep, get some rest, and then just await the winner of Tampa Bay and Florida.
Yeah, it will be a lot different for the Toronto fans if they could sweep Ottawa, because they're not used to seeing Toronto end a series or dominate a series the way they have with this one. Ottawa's a feisty team. They're not going to go down easy. They don't want to get swept. They're going to fight like hell to try to beat their provincial rivals.
And you have to think also, Brady Tkachuk has waited so long to get into the playoffs. And even if they don't win this series, win a game.
Yeah, exactly. Let's win a game to get our pride, to stay proud of what we're doing. There have been overtime games that could have gone either way, but still they're down 3-0.
A little bit of news coming out of Ottawa. Before the third game, there was a little bit of an incident where Nick Cousins had shot pucks down towards Anthony Stolarz during warm-ups. The NHL investigated, and as a result, the Senators have been fined $25,000, and Cousins has been booked for $2,083.33, which, of course, is a piece of the salary.
Yeah, and that 33 cents will really hurt. I mean, all the rest of it. Reminds you of Claude Lemieux, right? Shooting the pucks into the opponent's net during the, what was it?
It was Canadiens and Flyers, Game 6 in 1987. And Lemieux just had this habit of wanting to shoot the pucks down into the empty net after everybody had left the ice, and the Flyers were onto that. They stayed on. Pretty soon, the locker rooms had emptied, and everybody was on the ice, including some guys in shower slippers.
Yeah. It reminds me of that, though, when I talk about shooting the puck into the other net. I mean, it's such grade school stuff, isn't it? I mean, it's just silliness, but that's hockey.
And hockey people will say that, hey, it's just gamesmanship.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah.
Gamesmanship, superstition, any way you slice it. It is time for this day in Stanley Cup history.
Oh, good, good.
All right, here we go. 50 years ago today marked the second time in NHL history a team down 3-0 in a playoff series came back to win as the New York Islanders defeated Pittsburgh 1-0 on a goal by Ed Westfall with 5:18 left in the third period. Chico Resch with 30 saves in this quarterfinal win, outdueling Gary Innes.
What great names. Eddie Westfall, Chico Resch in net versus Gary Innes. Great old names, great players.
Great memory. And the Islanders nearly pulled that off again in the semis, dropping the first 3 games to Philadelphia, then winning the next 3 before dropping a 4-1 decision in the Spectrum in Game 7. Now, this was one of the few times that Kate Smith actually appeared live. And Chico Resch had said that I was a little bit off my game at the beginning because the organ was parked right in my crease. And, of course, Gary Dornhofer scored at 19 seconds. Rick McLeish scored the first of his 2 goals at 2:27. And that game was over pretty early. But just something about putting an organ in the goalie crease.
Well, and Chico could have become an organ donor.
He could have after that game. Maybe we have to check back to see if he is. Since then, it has happened 2 other times that clubs have come back from down 3-0 in the playoffs. 2010, the Flyers over the Bruins in the Eastern semis. They were also down 3-0 in Game 7 of that game and came back to win. And then they went on and lost to the Blackhawks in 6 games in the Stanley Cup final that year. And in 2014, the Kings overcame an 0-3 deficit against the Sharks. The Kings actually won 3 Game 7s during that playoff year, and they hold the NHL record, winning 7 elimination games that spring. And, of course, they went on to beat the Rangers in 5 games to win the Stanley Cup. 1942 is the only time that it had ever happened in a final with the Maple Leafs beating Detroit. But it almost happened last year when the Oilers came back from down 3-0 to tie the Panthers, only to drop Game 7 2-1.
Yeah, it almost happened. It almost was there. Almost doesn't work, so we'll wait to see when somebody really does it.
That'll wrap up our show for today. Don't forget to like us and please subscribe. We will be back on Sunday with another edition of Stanley Cupdate. So for now, on behalf of Neil, I'm Vic, and enjoy the hockey on Saturday.